بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا وهدى وتقى ورشادا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا التأويل. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من علم لا ينفع ومن قلب لا يخشع ومن نفس لا تشبع ومن دعوة لا تسمع. نعوذ بك اللهم من هؤلاء الأربعة. أما بعد. So حياكم الله جميعا. This is a gathering. Let us remind ourselves. Let us review our intentions. We are here to seek knowledge, we are here to seek ilm, and we are here to seek ilm for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that whatever we learn, we act upon it. And we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a better way, upon Baseera, upon ilm, upon clarity. And the majalis of ilm are majalis where the rahmah, the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descends. وما اجتمع قوم في بيت من بيوت الله يتلون كتاب الله ويتدارسونه بينهم. Whenever a group of people, they gather in a house from the houses of Allah, and we said this is inshallah خرج مخرج الغالب, so لا مفهوم له inshallah. They recite the book of Allah and they study it amongst them. إلا نزلت عليهم السكينة, the tranquility descends upon them. وغشيتهم الرحمة, the mercy of Allah surrounds them. وحفتهم الملائكة, the angels, they surround them. وذكرهم الله في من عنده, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions them amongst the people, amongst those who are with him, the angels. So it's a great honor, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us mukhlis, grant us ikhlas, grant us sincerity in whatever effort we make in seeking knowledge or even in imparting it. Yesterday, our meeting got stopped somewhere around the mas'ala regarding wiping on the leather socks. If that is correct, yes. However, before we continue from where we left off, there were a few things that I wanted to discuss with you. There were a few fawaid that I had did not mention previously. Firstly, if you remember, there is a hadith, or generally there is a ruling regarding remembering Allah or mentioning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when relieving oneself during qada al-haja, or when a person is not in the state of tahara. So generally we said that when you enter the toilet, you're not supposed to take with you anything that has the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in it, right? Correct? Okay. In our times, likewise, for example, mentioning or doing dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when in the toilet. This is also something that would be makruh al aqal. So I would request everyone to come a little forward, inshallah. That'll be easier, because I think the noise of the AC would prevent you from listening clearly. In our times, people sometimes they tend to take the phones with them. And for example, if you have taken the phone with you inside, and for example, if you are generally conversing with someone, this includes saying salam sometimes. And salam, the Prophet ﷺ did not return the salam, stating that karihtu an adhkur Allah wa ana ala ghayri tahara. So saying salam is a kind of dhikr of Allah, it's a kind of remembrance of Allah, because you are praying that Allah sends salam to him. The qa'idah, there is a principle with regards to this. The principle says, this is just a general fa'idah that I forgot to mention earlier. The principle says, al-kitabu kal-khitabi. This is in Arabic, it says, writing is the same as stating or addressing someone. So writing is equal to stating or uttering or addressing someone. And uttering, we have 2 R's, 1 R. 2 T's, 1 R. Yes. Okay. So why is this important? Because, for example, if a person divorces his wife through a WhatsApp chat, he says, I divorce you. He writes it. The divorce will be applicable. So this is the qaida. Al-kitabu kal-khitab. Writing takes the same ruling as uttering or stating. Given this, firstly, it's better to avoid, generally speaking, taking the phone with one in the toilet. But if someone does, then they must avoid mentioning anything that has a dhikr of. They should avoid mentioning anything that has a dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is one fa'idah. This was, I took this fa'idah from Shaykh Sa'd al-Khathlan when he came to Makkah. Okay, one thing that we forgot yesterday was when we discussed muwalat. Muwalat, yani when we are performing wudu, this one, mas'ala number 3. When we are performing wudu, each yani step should be followed up with the other one without there being too long an interval. There shouldn't be too long an interval between two yani steps of wudu. What was the dalil for this? We just generally mentioned how this will be applied and how it is, for example, if there is a genuine excuse, it will be yani, not applicable. But what was the dalil for this in the first place? Does anyone know of a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ saw someone on someone's foot, lum'ah, a small spot that was left unwashed, left dry? Yeah, wherever it was on his foot. Lum'ah, he saw a small spot which was left unwashed and dry. So he told him to repeat the wudu instead of just going and washing his foot, that spot. Do you understand this? So when the Prophet ﷺ is telling him to repeat the wudu, goes on to show that the gap between two steps in the wudu shouldn't be too long. Because there was a long interval, that's why the Prophet ﷺ told him to repeat the wudu instead of telling him just to wash that spot and that's it. But if, for example, you just have come out of the place of wudu, you just come out and I saw, for example, that some of your part of your foot was left dry, I will just tell you to go back and wash that part of the foot. But because the interval was long, so the Prophet told him to repeat the wudu. Okay. Yes, Sheikh.
Do you know anything about whether it's best to let do a drawing by itself, or whether it's best to tell versus
There is a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, we will discuss today. This is the hadith of Maymuna when the Prophet ﷺ performed ghusl, and after that Maymuna radiallahu anha, she offered the Prophet ﷺ a towel, and the towel was called in the hadith mindil. What do we use the word mindil for today? Tissue paper. But and mindil is anything that you wipe with. That's the towel. Okay, so the word mindil was used. So Prophet ﷺ did not use the mindil, and rather he, what would we call this? Shook his hands to dry it off, to shake off the water from his hands and body. This hadith is used by some scholars. They may say that it's better not to use a towel. Some others would say the fact that Maymuna radiallahu anha was offering him the towel in the first place goes on to show that he had an aada that he would usually use it. This one-off single time he perhaps did not use it, because Maymuna radiallahu anha right now she is transmitting to us a one-off incident. That is when the Prophet performed ghusl. But she's not telling us what was his regular habit. So some say that it is mustahab to not use. Some would say that rather one can use, no problem. In any case, this will be considered from the adat, from the habits of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sahih? Habits? Custom, it can be for an individual as well. Habits for an individual. So from the habits of the Prophet ﷺ, when it comes to the habits of the Prophet ﷺ, the ulama say that, for example, the likes and dislikes of the Prophet ﷺ, when it comes to personal matters, for example, food, using towel, for example, a certain kind of wear dress that he wears, or certain kind of sandals that he would wear. So with regards to this, the ulama say that this will not be considered something that is encouraged shar'an. The sharia does not require this. لا يطلب منا شرعا. It is not required from us shar'an. However, if one does it in imitation of the Prophet ﷺ, out of love for him, the reward will be for the love, not the action itself. You see, it is to attribute this to the Sharia and say that this is something that is part of the Sharia, to not use a towel, to wear a certain kind of sandal, to wear a certain kind of thawb, to not, for example, to not close the buttons, the upper buttons, for example, of your thawb. These are some things that were narrated from the Prophet ﷺ. So if you say this is part of Sharia, this is difficult to say. But you can say if someone does it out of love for the Prophet ﷺ and he wants to imitate him, even in these things, out of love for him, he will be rewarded for his love of the Prophet ﷺ, not for the action itself. Because when we say he will be rewarded for the action itself, we are attributing this action to the Sharia. We're saying this is part of the Sharia, part of the Islamic rulings. واضح? Okay. Then one more thing that I wanted to discuss from yesterday was now related to the wiping of the socks and the leather socks. Yesterday we mentioned some of the conditions that which are required to be fulfilled in order for wiping over the socks to be permissible. So we said that the socks must be worn in the state of tahara. And we mentioned that for a resident, for someone who's a non-traveler, the time is 24 hours. And for someone who's a traveler, 72 hours. We mentioned that the time starts from the first wipe after one has invalidated the wudu. Then the first time he wipes over the socks, that's when the time starts. And we gave example for that as well. One thing that we did not mention yesterday was that the socks must be such that they cover the obligatory part of the foot. So for example, the no-show socks, you know no-show socks? No-show socks means like socks that don't cover the ankles. You know, like some people just wear them for when they wear those loafers. So they wear no-show socks. It doesn't cover the ankle. So can we wipe over the no-show socks? We cannot wipe over the no-show socks. Why? Because it does not cover the obligatory part of the foot. This is by the agreement of all of the four imams and also the ikhtiyar of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. This was something that we did not mention yesterday.
There is no hadith.
Regarding this, no particular nas regarding this, but this is close to an ijma'. طيب. This was something that we missed out on yesterday, and then okay. One more thing that we did not mention yesterday was the dalil for wiping over the cast or the bandage, or the dressing. For example, if there's a dressing on the wound or there's a cast for a fracture, مثلا, we can wipe over it. What is the dalil for this? The dalil for this is from the Prophet ﷺ, nothing has been proven. But there is an athar from Ibn Umar, إذا كان عليه عصاب مسحه. If there was some kind of a bandage on Ibn Umar, he would wipe over it. And this is also something that is required by necessity, because we cannot just undo the bandage every single time, or for example, we cannot wash the wound at times. Sometimes we cannot remove the cast, otherwise it will be dangerous for our, for example, recovery, etc. So it's required by necessity, and there is an athar of Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma as well. So this is how we took it, and also we did qiyas on tayammum and mash al-khuffayn. Yes. The mash al-khuffayn. This was something that we did discuss yesterday. Here the Shaykh says, لا بأس ما في مشكلة. لا ما في مشكلة. لا هذا أصلا we were supposed to repeat this because at this time the meeting had been it got disconnected. This is mas'ala number 36. We are on mas'ala number 36, everyone, right? Sheikh, did you find it? Okay. وصفة مسح الخفين. What is the way, the description, or the method of doing so? أن يمسح أكثر ظاهرهما. To wipe over most of the upper part of the khuffain, and not the bottom part of the foot, rather the upper part of it. And akthara means most of it. It's not obligatory, as we mentioned yesterday, to make sure that the hand touches every single part of the top of the khuf or the leather sock or the socks generally. Rather, most of it. That is sufficient.
Our hands are wet, right? So should we do it both together, both the foot, or one by one?
When we are doing wudu, which one do we give precedence to? So the asal is that whenever something is a substitute for another, you follow the same sequence and same method. So for example, here wiping over the socks is a substitute for washing the feet. So just like you wash the feet, you start with the right one, should wipe over the right sock first and then the left one. However, if you did not do so, ما في مشكلة. صحيح. even if sometimes if a person mistakenly, let's say, generally we're supposed to follow the sunnah, or generally we're supposed to give precedence to the right. But if let's say he washes the left elbow before the right one, مثلا هذا يصح, the wudu is correct. والله أعلم. Yes.
So there is some if the deal or what is there, then we will wipe to the understand the results.
There's an athar from Ali radiallahu anh that if the deen was based on purely on our rational and aql, then the bottom part of the khuf was more worthy of being wiped and cleansed than the upper one. But these are rituals, this is ibadah, this is something that is ta'abbudi. This is done as an ibadah, this is done the way the Prophet ﷺ teaches us, and hence we're not supposed to use our, for example, or contradict what the Sharia says with our aql. If we have authenticated and verified that this is what the Sharia says, this is what the Quran says, this is what the Sunnah says, this is what the Sahaba understood, then we are not supposed to contradict it with our aql. واضح? Because your aql, you can get it wrong. It's very likely that because your aql is daif, it's weak, it is influenced by so many factors. The content that you watch, what you consume, what you listen to, the people who are around you, they all influence the way you think and you view things and influence your perspectives. So it's not a very reliable mizan or scale, or not a very reliable lens to see things from. And hence the most reliable lens to see things from is the Quran and Sunnah and the understanding of the Sahaba and the Tabi'een. If it goes somewhere against your aql, maybe you should doubt your aql more than the Quran, Sunnah, and the understanding of the Sahaba. Yes.
So just to point this today, you mentioned 4 shurut for wiping over the socks. You mentioned all those wearing them, but we didn't get into it.
The 4 shurut, we were just revising the ahkam of wiping over the socks generally. So we said they should be worn in the state of tahara. They must cover the obligatory part of the feet, which is until the ankles. And then we also mentioned for the resident, the time is 24 hours. And for a traveler, the time is 72 hours. And the time starts from the first wipe after one has invalidated their wudu. In addition to this, we can mention that the ruling is applicable to everything that is considered a sock or khuf, even if it is, as long as it is being called a khuf or a sock, the ruling will apply to it. The ruling will apply to it as long as it is being called so. So even if it has some holes in it, as long as it is usable as a sock, the ruling will apply to it. Because of the qaida that we learned at the very beginning of usul al-fiqh, that whenever something is mentioned in the Quran and Sunnah, we see, has the Sharia defined it particularly? If there is a particular definition for it in Sharia, we go by it. If there is no particular definition in the Sharia, then we go by what is considered so in the norms. Remember, Sheikh? حقيقة عرفية, حقيقة شرعية.
So minor ritual impurities.
Yes, this was the last shot, that it is only for minor ritual impurity, for which we require a wudu. As for janaba, or something that you require ghusl, you cannot wipe over the socks. You have to, of course, remove the socks and then perform ghusl. This is clear, inshallah? So how many shurut or how many ahkam? 6 ahkam taqriban that we discussed. Sahih, inshallah.
4 yesterday, but now I'm not listening.
We discussed them, I think, without a sequence. But I think all of these 6 we went by them. But when we were listing them, we forgot to mention some of them. Sahih, yes.
What about shoes? Which cover?
Shoes, if they cover up to the ankles, خلاص نفس الشيء. تمسح عليه. Okay, and there was another hukum that we mentioned. If you remove the socks after having wiped over them, will your wudu be considered invalidated? Or would it be considered still valid?
Right.
Still valid, because when you wipe over the socks, you achieve complete tahara. And there was one issue that was asked by Brother Umar. That is still, I'm still in doubt with regards to it, so I don't know. I tried to look for it. Some of them say because the complete tahara is achieved, so even if you remove the socks and then you wear them again, then you may wipe over them again. But I'm not sure so far. I still have to look for it. Jabira, with regards to the cast, it's supposed to be wiped over all of it, not just the upper part of it. Why? Because of the qaida that we mentioned just a while ago, that the substitute takes the same ruling as the asl. The asl was the main was to wash that body part. You put a cast on it, so you have to wipe over all of it. Wipe over all of it. واضح? Clear, Sheikh? Fine, fine.
Because not a feeling, because sometimes you don't want to make the cast wet, because some certain bandage.
Jamil, very important question. Certain bandages or certain casts, you don't even want to wipe over them. Is it possible that not even just a slightly wet hand can?
The white hard parts, we can really wipe.
Yeah, we can wipe.
Certain bandages, for example, burns and things like that. We don't want to soil them, we don't want to make them wet because you want them to heal well and you don't want to disturb them. But you don't really want to make them wet. That for certain instances.
Not at all. Not even a slightly wet hand, you cannot pass over it. Because this is just symbolic mostly. It doesn't need to be, all of it does not need to be made wet. So, okay, if that is the scenario, then some of the ulama, they mentioned that firstly, if the first ruling is to wash. Let me just repeat the question. Question asked is sometimes some bandages, we cannot even wipe over them with a wet hand for medical reasons. If that is the case, then generally the ruling is first to wash. If one cannot wash, then he moves to wiping over it. If one cannot wipe over it, then the ulama, they mentioned that you perform wudhu for the rest of the body parts, and for this you perform tayammum. So you perform two together. Allahu alam, I haven't gone deep into this issue, but this is how they mentioned that you perform first wudhu for the rest of the body, parts of wudhu, and for this particular one you just have to do tayammum so that it covers up the remaining tahara. Clear, inshallah? Okay, the question was asked regarding shoes. Shoes, yes, we already mentioned that shoes, if they cover until the ankles, you can wipe over them. If the cast is on the foot, do we wipe over the top or the top and bottom? No.
I think sometimes sometimes situation where a lot of breads and the things, so they cannot even make them properly. To have things projected in your past, trips and medication. So you cannot move it to your hand and make them.
No one can help you either do the tayammum?
Can help you,
Yeah.
because of many things are inserted, so you may not even want to touch that. This can just be on the remaining part of the.
Tayammum is only done on the hands anyways, and it's not done on the forearms. So if there is no way, then generally the shurut will also be excused. But generally one can find a way unless he has burns on his hands or something like that. That's a different scenario altogether. With regards to this cast on a foot, it's a very good question. Here, the thing is, when it comes to the cast, the rulings differ from the socks. For socks, we said they must be worn in the state of tahara. The cast is not necessarily worn in the state of tahara. So will it take the ruling, a cast on a foot, will it take the ruling of the socks, or will it take the rulings of a cast? It appears, wallahu alam, that if it's, of course, if it's applied for dharura, for necessity, and it's not worn in the state of tahara, then that it will take the ruling of a jabira, of a cast, and Allahu alam, then we might wipe over both of the sides. Wallahu alam. Wallahu alam. Nullifiers of ablution of nawaqid al-wudu. This was the next bab. We discussed a little bit regarding this. Anything that leaves the body via the private parts, al-khariji. Al-khariju min as-sabilaini mutlaqan. Anything that leaves from the private parts, generally this will break the wudu. This will break the wudu. We mentioned regarding this some scenarios that were this is the general ruling for urine, for feces. This is the ruling for madhi. Madhi is also a type of fluid. It's called prostatic fluid, if I'm not wrong, Sheikh. And there is another kind of fluid. It's called al-wadi. I'm not sure what's the medical term for that, but sometimes after urine, it's a fluid follows up, it's whitish in color. And some people who suffer from, it's either a problem or not, I'm not even sure, but some people, they might have this thing. After urine, a whitish fluid follows the urine. So that is called wadi. These all generally, when they exit the body, the wudu is considered invalidated. Also the mani as well, the semen as well. When it comes to, for example, we mentioned yesterday in cases where someone's, for example, they put a stoma for someone who cannot, for example, urinate properly, who has problems with his bladder, so they would put a stoma on lower abdomen, and this stoma can be used using a catheter. We can drain the urine directly from the bladder. So if we mentioned yesterday, I'm repeating this because we Sheikh did not record it. Yeah, inshallah, this is relevant for all of us, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. So there are two scenarios here. When someone what do we call the process, Sheikh? We say putting a stoma, or like fixing, or what, like for buraz. Okay, for someone who's suffering with the and what's the opening called that is placed? Stoma bag. And so the opening is called stoma, right, Sheikh? In the lower abdomen. So in the lower abdomen, if we place a stoma, mathalan, and there are two scenarios. If he has a catheter connected all the time with a stoma bag, so this is a case of, we mentioned yesterday a term, al-hadath ad-daim, continuous ritual impurity. Continuous sahibul hadath ad-daim, a person who is suffering from continuous ritual impurity. Al-hadath ad-daim. This scenario includes a person who is suffering from urinary incontinence. It also includes, for example, a woman who is, for example, suffering from continuous bleeding outside of menses as well. So all of these people are called sahibul hadath ad-daim, a person who is suffering from continuous ritual impurity. In this scenario, if he has a catheter connected all the time to the stoma bag, then in this scenario the wudu will not break, will not be invalidated, even if when the urine is exiting the bladder, because this is something that is continuous, and he will not have to perform wudu for every single salah. Why? We said because the famous hadith of the mustahada is the word for the woman who is suffering from continuous bleeding even outside of menses. In the famous hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, in which Fatima bint Abi Hubaysh, she was suffering from istihada. When she asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told her how to deal with it. When the additional wording that is mentioned regarding performing wudu for every salah, ثُمَّ تَوَضَّئِ لِكُلِّ صَلَاةٍ, these words are not the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rather, 6842 AKD. Nisan. So we said that this addition of the word of this sentence is not correctly attributed to the Prophet ﷺ. Rather, this was the saying of one of the narrators, the student of and the nephew and the student of Aisha radiallahu anha, Urwa ibn al-Zubayr. He was the one who mentioned these wordings, وَثُمَّ تَوَضَّئِ لِكُلِّ صَلَاةٍ. And given this, the ruling is that you don't need to perform wudu for every single salah. Rather, all of the other nullifiers of wudu will nullify your wudu. But this particular one, which is urine coming out, or for example, the woman bleeding, or any other scenario, this will not break the wudu. Yes, Sheikh?
Sorry, can you translate that extra phrase?
The extra phrase was ثُمَّ تَوَضَّئِ لِكُلِّ صَلَاةٍ, yani perform wudu for every single salah. These are not the words of the Prophet ﷺ, according to the muhaqqiqeen, the senior hadith scholars like Ibn Rajab and all of that, the scholars of Ilal. They said these words actually belong to Urwa ibn al-Zubayr, not the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, if he, for example, if the person who is suffering from this, for example, he has his bladder, not the bladder, but the ureter is closed sometimes. It's I happen to have a friend who has had this surgery done for him. So sometimes if the stoma is placed, he can use a catheter to drain the urine. So he doesn't have a bag necessarily all the time attached, but he can just use a small catheter to drain the urine whenever he feels like it. So if this is how he works, for example, he drains it at will, so that every time that he drains urine, this will be the time when the wudu will be invalidated, because he is similar to a person who is using the natural method for urination. But if it's continuous, he has a bag attached and it's continuous, then this will not break the wudu. Likewise, for example, someone who has his bowels removed, in case of cancer, mathalan, or any other scenario, and if the same method is applied, I'm not sure if there is also a method for draining the waste at will, or is it always continuous, Sheikh?
Common scenario, go to remember, common scenarios. For example, in case of stoma for the bowel, not for the urine or the stool.
For the stool.
It could be for many reasons, that's not go there. So basically you would have a colostomy bag, which is a bag, a plastic bag, which is attached to your abdominal wall outside.
Outside, okay, pouch, outside.
Like a sticker with a bag attached to your abdominal wall. And there's an opening in your abdominal wall, where the colon has been taken out to empty. Instead of the colon coming to your back passage, it's coming out
into this pouch.
It's coming out through your skin in your abdomen, and the Buraz is coming out and gets collected in a bag.
Okay.
And this bag is attached to you 24/7.
24/7.
You could remove it, clean it, but again they put a new bag again. Once it gets filled up by soil, you will remove it, you clean everything up, and again you mix it. And this is actually a long-term solution. Sometimes it can be reversed, but that's a different issue. But people are there with this and it's long-term.
So what is this pouch called, Sheikh?
It's a colostomy.
Colostomy. Okay. So this pouch is attached to the abdominal wall, and the waste is being collected 24/7 continuously. Okay. Yes. So this is similar to the case where. Okay. I understand. So this will be the case of a person of a hadath ad-daim, yani continuous ritual impurity. And there is another scenario for this, Sheikh. This one we cannot drain it at will. We cannot. Okay. Okay. For urine we have two options, right, Sheikh? Three options. Oh, okay. Okay. Continue. So which is usually when someone is admitted in the hospital. Oh, okay.
If you are bedridden, can't move, and things like that. I've sent home with a catheter, which is there for a long time, sometimes 6 months, and things like that. But what is the ruling on that?
That's similar. Someone who has a catheter attached to his private part, it's the same as sahib al-hadath ad-daim, yani someone who has continuous ritual impurity.
Some people have a similar catheter, but inserted directly into the bladder.
Directly into the bladder. Okay.
So right in the bladder is instead of coming from the private part, it comes direct from the bladder, but it's again continuous.
Continuous, again, same ruling. Directly catheter attached to the bladder, same ruling. Yes.
Then there's the third option where the tubes in the kidneys are brought out into an opening into the skin of the colon. So it's called a colostomy conduit. But again, it's not like a catheter. It is actually like a bag. Sometimes it can be catheterized. That's where I think there's a bit of a confusion. But usually, again, you will put a small bag attached to the skin, like how you have a colostomy, and the urine keeps collecting in the colostomy all the time.
The bag is outside the body. So we don't have that option in which we can just put a catheter and.
They do that.
Okay. Okay.
I don't see many of them.
Okay. Oh.
And then there's the fourth one, kidney in the back, or in the colostomy. So we put a tube directly into the kidney and leave it for the urine to get drained directly to the kidneys by tubes to your back into a pouch.
Into a pouch again outside the body.
So there was continuous.
All of these, but we don't we have this option where we can at will?
It's almost 3 hours or 3 hours, but you want to
exactly. Yeah, that is also. Yes, for the intermittent catheter. catheterization. Now, that is the one where we have to, the wudu will be considered invalidated. طيب. Now, this is al-kharij min as-sabilaini mutlaqan generally. Okay. Some of the ulama, they said, for example, when it comes to the discharge, in case of women, for example, the discharge, they mentioned because this is something that is not something that is also at times continuous. So they mentioned that the discharge, or we call it in Arabic, rutubatu farjil mar'a. Rutuba, any kind of discharge. So this is not considered something that would invalidate the wudu. Just like sahib salas al-bawl, someone who has urinary incontinence, and the others. Number 2, وَالدَّمُ الْكَثِيرُ وَنَحْوُهُ. Now this is the second one. Lahla, questions here. There is a white discharging during salah. Will this break the wudu? Yani after a person has performed wudu and now they are in salah and then there is a white discharge, any kind of discharge, if it's during the prayer and this is not something that he suffers from continuously, then this will break the wudu. Wallahu a'lam. Do elderly who use diapers have to follow the same ruling, or do they have to change the diaper and make wudu for each pair? Same ruling. Same ruling. Now, وَالدَّمُ الْكَثِيرُ وَنَحْوُهُ. Blood coming out of other than the private parts. So from other parts of the body, if a little amount of blood comes, this does not break the wudu generally. Even when it comes to the damul kathir, when it comes to an abundant amount of, or large amount of blood, ala sahih, the correct opinion is that it also does not invalidate the wudu. It does not invalidate the wudu. The dalil for this is subhanallah. They say because najasa, they generally say najasa coming out of any part of the body, they say this invalidates the wudu. But we need the dalil that najasa coming out from other parts of the body, would it invalidate the wudu or no? We need a dalil for that. So they did qiyas on the kharij min as-sabilain. They used to mention this issue, for example, urine or stool coming out from other parts of the body, but this was something that was not imaginable earlier. Today, in the cases that we have, it's also imaginable. But they generally did qiyas on the urine and stool, exiting from the private parts. So this is najasa coming out of any part of the body would invalidate the wudu. With regards to ad-damul kathir, lahza.
Spraying the stamps, for example.
That is also the fact that the companions would, despite being wounded, they would continue their prayers. So this goes on to show that it does not break the wudu. Likewise, for example, stabbed, for example, with regards to the qissa of Umar radiallahu anh, he stopped he could not continue the prayer. So I think Abdurrahman ibn Auf was the one who continued on his behalf. But there is, subhanallah, there was a dalil, subhanallah. Perhaps the dalil for it is the lack of dalil, the absence of dalil. We need a specific dalil for any kind of other kind of najasa coming out of the body for them to invalidate the wudu. So there is an absence of dalil. This is also the ikhtiyar, or the opinion of Malikiyya, Shafi'iyya, and also the ikhtiyar of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, and also the muallif himself, the author himself, Sheikh Sa'di, Abdurrahman Nasr al-Sa'di, he himself also in other works of his, he chooses the opinion that it would not break the wudu. It would not break the wudu. طيب. Number 3, زوال العقل بنوم أو غيره. زوال العقل, especially when it comes to nawm. Now for nawm, we have a particular hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then the rest of the types of zawal al-aql, and which means when you lose consciousness, we can go with those. We can go with those يعني قياسا على النوم يعني because if sleeping invalidates the wudu, then the rest of it, losing consciousness, passing out, fainting, or being in coma for a very long time, this will break the wudu all the more so. Now let's come to the hadith regarding it. The Prophet ﷺ, this is the only part of the hadith is mentioned here. He says in the English version, in the translation, you will see on the opposite end, the whole hadith is mentioned. The hadith says that the Prophet ﷺ commanded, the Sahabi says, أمرنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا كنا سفرا ألا ننزع خفافنا ثلاثة أيام بلياليهن. The Prophet ﷺ would command us if we were traveling not to remove our socks 3 days and nights إلا من الجنابة, except if it is in the case of janaba, because in the case of janaba you have to perform ghusl. Then he made he gave 3 scenarios where wudu is invalidated. He says ولكن من غائط وبول ونوم. 3 scenarios where wudu is invalidated and it is sufficient to wipe over the socks to perform wudu. What are these 3 scenarios? غائط. What is غائط? Defecation. Bawl, urination. طيب ونوم. And then he also mentioned sleep. Okay, is sleep يعني in and of itself something that invalidates the wudu, or has it been considered so because it is madhinna? Madhinna means it is a state in which it is likely that the wudu would be invalidated. It is the latter. Why? Because sometimes the Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ, when they would be waiting for the Prophet ﷺ to come out for Isha prayer, they would start dozing off, nodding off. Okay, yeah, start nodding off. In this scenario, they would just get up once the Prophet ﷺ would enter the masjid and pray with the Prophet ﷺ. Why was this not considered something that would invalidate the wudu?
They didn't completely go to sleep.
Because they did not completely fall asleep. Yani when you're nodding off, you're still the consciousness is still intact. You're still conscious about your surroundings. You still can feel, for example, anything that any abrupt occurrence wakes you up. Likewise, for example, if wind passes, you will gain consciousness. So this kind of sleep does not break the wudu. But generally, the ulama say when you fall into deep sleep, for example, when your body is at rest, when someone nods off in the masjid, he is not resting against the wall, not resting against the backrests that are placed in the masjid. No. But when your body is at rest, mathalan, at times, you tend to fall into deep sleep. This is when you lose consciousness. You're not sure what happens with you. And this was something that was mentioned in the hadith in Abu Dawud as well. The Prophet ﷺ said, Al-aynu wika'u as-sahr. Al-aynu wika'u as-sahr. You can look up this hadith later, inshallah. Al-aynu. Al-aynu wika'u as-sahr. Sah refers to the backside. Wika is something with which you tie a container. Well, not a container necessarily.
Drawstring.
A drawstring. Drawstring. You tie, and it's kind of a thread that you tie around something to close it. This is called wika. So he says, the Prophet said that the eyes are the drawstring. How do you spell it, Sheikh? Drawstring. Okay, drawstring. The eyes are like a drawstring. فَإِذَا نَامَتِ الْعَيْنَانِ. He says they are like a drawstring for the backside. فَإِذَا نَامَتِ الْعَيْنَانِ. Once both the eyes are asleep. السَّهْ. وِكَاءُ السَّهْ. وِكَاءُ السَّهِ. فَإِذَا نَامَتِ الْعَيْنَانِ. Once the eyes are asleep, استطلق الوكاء. يعني the drawstring is then untied, it's open. So this goes on to show the hikmah, the reason why sleep is considered something that invalidates the wudu, because you are likely to not know anymore whether the wudu is intact or it has been invalidated. Hence, if you fall into deep sleep, you're supposed to repeat your wudu. Istatlaqa. This is a lam. Sorry. Where is the thickness? Istatlaqa. Khalas. This is my beautiful handwriting. It's a lam.
Can we say that if someone remembers, then he has not gone into deep?
If someone remembers what?
He remembers, right? So once he's sitting, very fast, for example, he remembers that. We can say that he has not gone into deep.
Yeah, he's not going to deep sleep because he was able to feel when it subhanallah, this happened. Also, we can look it up on sunnah.com. مثلا عندك هنا استطلق, so that you may see the hadith. طبعا this hadith has ضعف in it, but generally it clarifies the hikmah from considering sleep. This is the hadith. العين وكاء السه فإذا نامت العينان استطلقا الوكاء. The eye when awake is a string of the backside, and if two eyes are asleep, the string is untied. واضح؟ طيب ننتقل الآن قال وزوال العقل. Now with regards to passing out, losing consciousness, being in coma, they are all the more so things that will invalidate the wudu. Question: when you fall asleep and you miss a prayer, what are you supposed to do? When you wake up, you make up for it, right? Okay. What if you were in coma for example, a whole day? And what if you were in coma for a couple of months? Are you supposed to make up those prayers, or are you supposed to not do so?
Because the hadith of the Prophet, he also said
The sign for sleeping is fine.
So if he's saying that being unconscious is the reason for sleep, we can apply the same thing.
But being unconscious is always like, does it always take the same ruling as sleeping? خلاص, this is homework. يلا عشان we should نحرك الأذهان. Okay. Inshallah, we will answer this question in the next class. Inshallah. بإذن الله تعالى. طيب. وزوال العقل بنوم أو غيره وأكل لحم الجزور. Yes, please. It's أكل لحم الجزور. Jim has a fatha on it. Jazur refers to camel. Al-Jazur, what is the dalil for this? The dalil for this is the hadith mentioned by the Shaykh himself. He says the Prophet ﷺ was asked, أَنَا تَوَضَّأُ. There's a part of this hadith that was not mentioned. أَنَا تَوَضَّأُ مِنْ لُحُومِ الْغَنَمِ. Should we also perform wudu when we eat the meat of sheep and goats? The Prophet said, إِنْ شِئْتَ فَتَوَضَّأُ وَإِنْ شِئْتَ فَلَا. And if you want, you can do wudu. If you don't, you are not supposed to. But when it came to the question regarding the meat of the camel, the Prophet ﷺ said, yes, فَقَالَ نَعَمْ. Interestingly, what is the hikmah for this? There's a hadith. Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullah this. He said that لحظة. He says that it has a satanic power. القوة الشيطانية. It has قوة شيطانية. Satanic power, Sheikh. لحديث أبي لاس الخزاعي مرفوعا, because the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said, ما من بعير إلا على ذروته. There is no camel except that upon its hump there is a shaitan. قال شيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية رحمة الله says فيها من القوة الشيطانية ما أشار إليه النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بقوله فإنها جن من جن خلقت. It is from amongst the jinn that have been created. So the Prophet ﷺ here is alluding towards it being having some kind of satanic or shaitani influence. وقد قال صلى الله عليه وسلم فيما رواه أبو داود إن الغضب من الشيطان وإن الشيطان خلق من النار وإنما تطفأ النار بالماء فإذا غضب أحدكم فليتوضأ. Now he is now applying the fact that it has some kind of shaitani influence to it. He is now saying, why does wudu here become relevant? Because of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that anger is from the shaitan, and shaitan has been created from fire. This is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. وَإِنَّمَا تُطْفَأُ النَّارُ بِالْمَاءِ, and the fire is extinguished with water. فَإِذَا غَضِبَ أَحَدُكُمْ فَلْيَتَوَضَّأ. Hence, if someone amongst you becomes angry, he should perform wudu. So any kind of influence from the shaitan is negated and removed by performing wudu. So this is the relevance of wudu when it comes to eating the camel meat. We are also not allowed to pray in camels' pens, and this also can be related to the fact that it has some kind of influence of shaitan. And subhanallah, interestingly, the Prophet also mentioned that the people the shepherds who herd the camels, they tend to be people who are arrogant and proud as compared to those who herd the sheep and the goats. So يعني مجموعها تدل على there's some kind of shaitani influence on it. Number 5, 6, 7 after the adhan, inshallah. Number 5, وَمَسُّ الْمَرْأَةِ بِشَهْوَةٍ. This is mar'ah, not mir'ah. You can correct this, fatha. وَمَسُّ الْمَرْأَةِ بِشَهْوَةٍ, touching a woman, or generally a woman touching a man. بِشَهْوَةٍ, this is the ruling here. The راجح qawl with regards to this is that this also does not break the wudu. And if ulama have mentioned this, they have mentioned because it makes it likely that if a person is touching their spouse with shahwa, it makes it likely that they might, the prostatic fluid might be discharged generally. But unless and until that is the case, it does not break the invalidate the wudu. Yarhamukallah. The dalil for this that they use is this hadith, this ayah. أو جاء أحد منكم من الغائط أو لامستم النساء. The famous ayah from Surah Al-Ma'idah, which mentions that some of the things that invalidate the wudu. أو جاء أحد منكم من الغائط, someone who comes after relieving himself. أو لامستم النساء, or you have touched women. What is the meaning of لامستم النساء? طيب. أو لامستم النساء, here from the famous athar that we have is from Ali ibn Abi Talib radiyallahu anhu. It mentions, he says, قال اللمس هو الجماع. Here the lams, the touching, is actually a kinaya. It's a figurative expression for jima', for intercourse. So here it is not referring to mere touching, rather it is referring to the intercourse. So here he says al-lams huwa al-jima'. And Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma also he says أو لامستم النساء قال هو الجماع. It's referring to intercourse, not mere touching. Also the fact that the Prophet ﷺ is reported, for example here Aisha radiyallahu anha says كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ينال مني القبلة بعد الوضوء ثم لا يعيد الوضوء. The Prophet ﷺ would sometimes kiss me after having performed wudu, and then he would not and repeat the wudu. Also أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كان يقبلها وهو صائم ثم لا يفطر ولا يحدث وضوء, and he would not perform wudu again. Umar ibn al-Khattab also, in one of the narrations, he's reported to have he had a wife whose name was Asiyah. What's the meaning of Asiyah? Asa Ya'si. Yeah. This is the one who disobeys. So the Prophet ﷺ, and she was a beautiful wife. Generally she was good looking. So the Prophet ﷺ generally changed her name from Asi, because in Islam we're not supposed to have names with evil meanings or negative meanings. So he changed her name to Jamila. And Umar radiallahu anh loved her. So she would see off Umar radiallahu anh when he would be leaving his house, mathalan, and she would give him a kiss. So the Umar radiallahu anh, after having performed wudu, he would leave the house and she would go back inside. And he would not repeat the wudu. So this also goes on to show that the madhab of the Sahaba, or that of Umar ibn Khattab, is that the touching of a woman or one's spouse does not break the wudu. قال ومس الفرج. مس الفرج. Farj refers to private part. What is mentioned in the hadith is a man's private part. It mentions من مس ذكره فليتوضأ. The one who touches their private part, they should perform wudu. They should perform wudu. And there is a hadith of another Sahabi, Talq ibn Ali, if I'm not wrong. This is hadith of Busr ibn Safwan, if I'm not wrong. And the hadith of Talq ibn Ali, it mentions, he asked the Prophet ﷺ, what if a person touches his private part? He says, هل هو إلا بضعة منك. It's just a part of you. So you no need to perform wudu again. So these are two hadith that are apparently contradicting each other. Some of the ulama, like Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullah alayh. Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullah alayh, he says that it's only mustahab, it's only desirable, recommended that you perform wudu. Touching the private part does not break the wudu. Some other scholars, they said, if you touch it with some some barrier, for example, there's a cloth, you're wearing clothes, and then you touch it, then it does not break the wudu. Without a barrier, it would break the wudu. Generally, best is to perform wudu, because a lot of the Sahaba, Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullah alayhi, he mentions that around more than 10 Sahaba, it is narrated that it would break the wudu. He mentions Umar radiallahu anh, Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, Abu Hurairah, Zayd ibn Khalid, Bara ibn Azib, Ibn Umar, Ibn Abbas, Jabir ibn Abdullah, Anas ibn Malik. And all of these, they view that the wudu is either broken or one must perform wudu after it. So best is to perform wudu. Otherwise, the qawl that it does not break the wudu, rather it is mustahab, is also a very strong opinion. Generally, because when it comes to the bab of adab, remember we discussed this in usul al-fiqh. When it comes to teaching etiquettes and mannerisms, generally the commands of the Prophet ﷺ, the awamir, are interpreted as mustahab, not as obligatory. And this is one of that. So the qawl that it is mustahab, which is also the ikhtiyar of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, is also it has a lot of strength to it. قال وتغسيل الميت, or giving ghusl to the mayyit, to the dead. This is the hadith with regards to Allah alam is da'if. With regards to, and even if it is sahih, it is considered only mustahab and not wajib. And Ibn Umar is reported to have mentioned that some of us would give the mayyit a ghusl, and then some of us would perform ghusl, others would not perform ghusl. And when we would wash the mayyit, some of us would perform ghusl, others would not perform ghusl. So given this, taghsil al-mayyit, the correct opinion is that it does not invalidate the wudu and does not make ghusl obligatory. Finally, الردة وهي تحبط الأعمال كلها. Ridda means apostasy, leaving Islam. And he says, because why? What is the dalil that the Shaykh is using? He says, because it destroys all of the actions. However, some scholars, they mention the ayah, and I'll show you the ayah. And you will derive from the ayah. Where is Quran.com? Here. From this ayah, some of the scholars, they mention, no, the ridda will not break the wudu. What is the dalil from here? The part starts from here, from this part. This is the relevant part of the ayah. Fayamut, this is the key word here. When are the deeds destroyed of a kafir, of a person who has committed apostasy? When he dies upon kufr. When he dies upon kufr. Hence, Shaykh Sa'ad al-Khatran says it does not break the wudu, because the dalil that we use is that it destroys the amal. It destroys the amal when a person dies upon kufr. So as long as he's not dying upon kufr, then the amal remains intact. And based on this, we will also judge if someone has performed hajj and then he left Islam and then he entered Islam again. Will he have to repeat the hajj again? According to this ayah, he won't have to repeat the hajj because he did not die upon kufr. Understand? That is, I think, it for today, because we took a lot of time in other issues. And these dalils, we have discussed them. Inshallah, that which obligates ghusl and the manner of performing it, we will do that inshallah in our next class. We will try to move quicker so that next week we are done with our Kitab al-Tahara. Week after that, we will have just for 2 days Kitab al-Hajj for everyone who's going for Hajj and those who want to attend, inshallah. So next week, inshallah, we'll try to finish Kitab al-Tahara bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.